They called it the war to end all wars, a conflict so vast, so devastating, that it reshaped the world forever. But while battles raged above ground with artillery fire, machine guns, and gas clouds drifting across no man's land, the true story of World War I was often lived and died below the mud. In the trenches, men endured conditions so brutal that even surviving a day could feel like a miracle. This wasn't just fighting. This was existence stripped to its rawest form. Hunger, disease, fear, and the strange secrets buried in the soil itself. Today, we're going to descend into the trenches of the First World War and uncover what life, death, and hidden truths really looked like beneath the mud. Imagine the Western Front in 1914. Millions of soldiers from Britain, France, Germany, and beyond, locked in a stalemate stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. The front line didn't move much, only a few yards at a time, despite thousands of lives lost. To hold ground and survive enemy fire, soldiers dug in. What began as shallow holes for cover soon evolved into a complex system of trenches, zigzagging across Europe like scars carved into the earth. By 1915, trench warfare was the dominant reality. But let's make something clear. These trenches weren't orderly or glamorous. They weren't clean. They weren't safe. They were muddy, rat-infested, disease-ridden pits that turned young men into ghosts long before bullets touched them. A typical trench was about 6 to 8 feet deep and 4 to 6 feet wide. They zigzagged instead of running straight, so if an enemy bomb landed or soldiers stormed in, they couldn't wipe out everyone in one sweep. There were frontline trenches closest to enemy fire, support trenches behind them, and reserve trenches further back. These were connected by communication trenches, forming a deadly labyrinth where soldiers moved under constant risk of sniper fire or shelling. Sandbags, wooden planks, and barbed wire lined these trenches, but nothing could truly keep out the rain. After heavy storms, trenches flooded, filling with water and mud so thick it could swallow boots, even whole bodies. Soldiers waded through it, hour after hour, day after day, until the mud itself became a second enemy. And that's just the structure. The real horror was in the living. Life in the trenches was a constant grind between boredom and terror. Hours of silence broken by sudden bombardments. Soldiers often described the noise of shelling as deafening, like the sky itself ripping apart. But when the guns quieted, silence could be worse, because silence meant waiting. Waiting for an order to attack, waiting for an enemy raid, waiting for death you couldn't see coming. Sleep was rare. Shifts rotated, with some men on watch while others tried to rest. But rats scurried over their blankets, feeding on scraps, and lice burrowed into uniforms, making true rest impossible. Soldiers joked grimly about chats, lice so common that men burned their seams with candles to kill the eggs. The smell was overwhelming too. Rotting corpses left in no man's land, unwashed bodies, stagnant water, and latrines dug too close to where men slept. The trench wasn't just a place of fighting. It was a place of slow decay. If enemy bullets didn't kill you, the trench itself might. One of the most infamous conditions was trench foot. Constantly standing in cold, wet mud caused feet to swell, blister, turn black, and rot. If untreated, amputation was the only option. Thousands of men lost their feet not from combat, but from mud and water. Then there was disease. Respiratory problems came from breathing damp air mixed with smoke and later, poison gas. Shell shock, what we now know as PTSD, crippled soldiers mentally, leaving them trembling, unable to speak, or paralyzed from trauma alone. And of course there was gas warfare. Chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas turned the air itself into an assassin. Gas masks became part of daily life, but they were primitive, often failing. Mustard gas in particular burned skin, blinded eyes, and lingered in the mud for weeks. Imagine crouching in a trench, praying for air that wouldn't kill you. Beyond the physical, the psychological strain was relentless. Men lived every day with death inches away. Friends were killed before their eyes. Letters home carried hidden sorrow. Soldiers often censored their own words so families wouldn't know the full horror. Some units suffered casualties so high that replacements barely knew the men they stood beside. And yet, amid this despair, there were moments of humanity. Soldiers shared songs, played cards, carved graffiti into trench walls. Famously, in December 1914, soldiers on both sides declared unofficial truces for Christmas. They exchanged gifts, sang carols, and even played football in no man's land. For a brief moment, humanity broke through the mud and madness. But those truces never lasted. Higher command quickly put an end to them, reminding soldiers they were there to kill, not to befriend. Here's where things get even more haunting. Beneath the trenches lay a hidden war, tunnels. Both Allied and German forces dug underground passageways, trying to place explosives beneath enemy lines. These tunneling units worked in silence, listening for enemy digging. If they heard them, counter-tunnels were dug, leading to deadly underground confrontations. When mines exploded, entire sections of trench disappeared, along with everyone inside. The Battle of Messines in 1917 saw nearly 10,000 Germans killed instantly when 19 massive mines were detonated beneath their trenches. But the mud kept other secrets too. Archaeologists still uncover bodies preserved in the soil, uniforms, helmets, even letters sealed in tins. Some soldiers went missing not because they fled, but because the earth itself swallowed them during bombardments. The trenches were graves as much as they were fortresses. By 1918, the trench stalemate finally shifted with new tactics: tanks, coordinated artillery, and fresh American troops. The war ended in November of that year, but the scars of trench warfare never healed. Nearly 10 million soldiers died, millions more wounded, and entire generations scarred. The trenches became symbols of both endurance and futility, places where courage and suffering intertwined, and where victory was measured not in miles gained, but in survival itself. Today, some of those trenches remain preserved in France and Belgium, silent reminders of what war costs. Walking through them, you feel the claustrophobia, the weight of history pressing in. The trenches teach us not only about strategy and failure, but about humanity's breaking point and resilience. Soldiers who lived in those conditions endured the unimaginable, yet many still found ways to laugh, to write poetry, to believe in something beyond the mud. The story of the trenches isn't just about war. It's about what happens when progress, pride, and politics trap millions of lives in a pit of mud and steel. It's about how humans adapt, endure, and sometimes collapse under pressure that no one should ever face. And it's about the secrets still buried beneath the soil, silent witnesses to a century-old struggle that shaped the modern world. As you hear this, ask yourself, what do we carry forward from their suffering? Do we learn from their mistakes, or risk repeating them? The trenches remind us that war doesn't just happen on battlefields. It happens in the daily grind of survival, in the spaces where men lived like shadows, waiting for an end they could barely imagine. If this journey through the mud and memories of World War I made you see history in a new light, don't let it end here. Share this story, keep the conversation alive, and explore more of the untold human stories behind the wars that shaped our world. Because remembering isn't just about honoring the past, it's about protecting the future.